off. I do apologize for that. Um, so just in general, feel free to I get put questions in the chat if you're moved to, but I'm gonna have a hard time sort of monitoring them during the course of it. So I'm gonna try to stop after each section to give space for questions then, just to let everybody know how it's gonna go. And with that, I will start my screen share and we can get started.
And
Uh,
Elsie, I just want to let you know that Liz is going to monitor the chat and she's going to figure out what questions can be asked of you as well.
oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Is the PowerPoint coming through?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. Yep, so like I said, my name is Elsie Howell with Bay Area Legal Aid. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of programs and sort of going over the basics, what they look like, how you can get onto them, how you can keep them. So we're going to go through CalFresh, CalWORKS, General Assistance, and then touch a little bit about Social Security and SSI, SSDI. Starting us off with CalFresh. So what is CalFresh? It's a nutrition program that provides monthly food and benefits to households. These benefits are issued on an EBT card. They can be used, an EBT card can be used, like a credit card or a debit card at grocery stores, farmers markets, and some online retailers. Something that's important to know about CalFresh is that it's not a cash benefit. And so what that means is that even though CalFresh is going to spend like cash, at grocery stores and for food items and certain types of things, there are still restrictions on what you can buy and where you can buy it. Um, uh, for example, some things you can buy: food, seeds and plants to grow food, but you also are restricted from buying certain things that you might, associate with a grocery run: diapers, toilet paper, medications, things like that. Also, most folks can't buy hot foods or foods eaten in the store, but there are some exceptions to that we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, so we know what CalFresh is, so who gets it? Who is in the household? So in CalFresh, the household is a term of art, and it is a group of people who both live together and who regularly purchase and prepare food together. So this does not require folks to be related, and also there can be more than one household under one roof. There are some exceptions to this where, some folks have to be in the same household if they live together, regardless of regularly purchasing and preparing food. So that would be spouses who live together, and also children who are under 22 need to be included in the household with their parents if they're all living together. So CalFresh is excuse me, CalFresh is a benefit that is provided to folks who have have differing immigration statuses. Some examples of folks who are eligible would be lawful permanent residents, refugees, asylees. You can see some other groups of folks listed out here. And there are a couple of folks who are going to be ineligible. So if you're undocumented or a DACA recipient, then unfortunately, you're not going to qualify for CalFresh. And it's also just a little side note here for mixed status households where you have some members who qualify and some who don't based on their immigration status. And so when you're going through that application process, it's just important to note that ineligible household members should just specify that they are not applying. You still will need to provide income information, just as long as that income is being used to support the CalFresh household. But because they are not applying, they also cannot be required to provide an immigration status. What this also means is that when you're going through this, it's also just very important to, you can draw the line at saying, we are not applying, we're not part of the household, but you should never give a fake social security number or any other false or misleading information to the county when you're going through that application process. There are also some special rules when a household has somebody who is elderly or disabled, as defined by the program. So someone is elderly if they're 60 or older, and someone is disabled if they are receiving a disability-based benefit with a test at least as stringent as the Social Security Administration's disability test. We'll talk about that a little bit later today, but that can be a pretty stringent requirement. Also, VA determinations of total disability or needing aid in attendance can qualify someone as disabled. No longer as recent and updated as it used to be, now that it's back in 2019. But SSI recipients are now eligible for CalFresh, and so I still keep that in just as a reminder for folks. That wasn't true before June 1st of 2019. A couple of other exceptions here that also come up in the context of college students. College students are generally not eligible unless they meet unless they meet exceptions, and there are quite a few. So just some examples here: if you're employed for at least 20 hours a week, if you're approved for work study and anticipate working, if you get CalWorks. You can look at All County Information Notice, I-8915 for more, but just to note that for college students, it does change the analysis a little bit, and you do need to look to those exceptions for, excuse me, for eligibility. Okay, so we know what CalFresh offers, and we know who can be in the household. So now we're going to look at the financial eligibility component. So CalFresh does look at the income of people who are applicants and recipients, but it does have a special definition of income, which the money that must be either actually available to the household or what is called reasonably anticipated. And for the purposes of CalFresh and CalWorks, reasonably anticipated means that the household knows the date and the amount of money that they will be receiving. Some examples of things that don't count as income for CalFresh would be what's called in-kind income, things like, free housing, or, benefit services or goods provided at less than market rate, earned income of a student. I won't go through all of these with you, but there are a lot of things that can be exceptions to eligibility. If you're curious, I do recommend looking at the CalFresh Guide, which is put out by the Legal Services of Northern California, LISNIC. It's generally extremely up-to-date and reliable, and they have a lot of information there in a way that's pretty searchable and easy to find. Okay, so we know what counts as income. So, what does that mean and what do we do with it? So recipients and applicants need to pass two tests, gross and net income test. So the gross income test is relatively straightforward. You need to be below 200% of the federal poverty level for most households. If there's an elderly or disabled member in the household, then you don't need to worry about this gross income test in the same way. On the right side of the screen here, you see just a little table laying out household sizes and that 200% federal poverty level benchmark that applicants need to make sure that they're under.
We have one question. So if a college student was McKinney-Vento in high school, would they qualify for CalFresh in college, or would they just be dropped from their family benefits when they left college? Left for college.
Sorry, McKinney-Vento? I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
McKinney-Vento is illegal protections for homeless youth. And so if they're qualified for McKinney-Vento, it means they were homeless, they're a senior, and then they apply for college, they go to college, and then they can't get CalFresh anymore. Is that understanding correctly?
Yeah, to my knowledge, I don't know. I'm not aware of a carve out for folks who fall into that category. More generally, I'm as far as I'm aware, it would be the general college eligibility rules that would apply. There might be an exception out there, but if so, I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head. I apologize. I can't give you a more specific answer.
And we had one more question. Is time-limited rental assistance considered income? Not Section 8, for example. Rental assistance through, for example, rental assistance through encampment resolution funds, which is time-limited.
So there might be an exception it could fall under. So, that unfortunately I'm not sure of off the top of my head, but in general, CalFresh does look to both earned and unearned sources of income. So in general, unless it falls under another another exception, then as long as it is reasonably certain as to time and amount, then I think it would likely count as some kind of income. But I would also recommend checking either the LISNIC guide or the Manual of Policies and Procedures on that one, just because, there could be an exception it falls under. I don't know all the exceptions off the top of my head. Was that the last question for now? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so turning back to financial eligibility, there are some deductions that households get to apply as part of this, a financial eligibility assessment process. We've got some examples here, some common ones. The excess shelter deduction comes up pretty frequently. So if your monthly shelter costs are over 50% of your adjusted household income, then you can take a deduction from your income for certain amounts. Right now, I believe the maximum is $597, but there is no maximum for households with an elderly or disabled member. Medical expenses, also a relatively common deduction. If you're elderly or disabled, you can claim those. And it's any unreimbursed medical expense over $35. There's a standard deduction of $120 that everybody who falls into that elderly or disabled category will get. But if your personal costs go over, I believe it's roughly $150, then you can report that to the county, and that should let you get an individualized deduction as long as you meet that minimum threshold. There are some other common deductions listed out here at the bottom, but I won't just read them at you. But just to say, there can be quite a few, and it can be worth looking into them if it seems like household circumstances might entitle them to a higher deduction than they're getting.
I had one question come in. So, do unaccompanied minors qualify under their sponsor, or do they not qualify for CalFresh?
For unaccompanied minors. That is a very good question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know that CalFresh does have some specific requirements related to immigration status. So yeah, I'm not sure about that one off the top of my head. I apologize. But yeah, thank you. These are very good questions. Yeah. So we got our gross income. We got our gross income. We've taken a look at our deductions, and so now we're going to take a look at the net income. So essentially you just you take your gross income, you get all the deductions, and then you're going to be left with your net income. So 1 and 2 person households with an elderly or disabled member can qualify for a minimum benefit, which I believe is about $23 a month, even if they don't meet the net income test. So an important caveat to throw out there for those households. And on the right-hand side of the screen here, you can see, once again, just a table laying out what that benchmark that the household is going to need to meet is based on the household size. There are also resource limits. So unlike some of the other programs we're going to talk about today, most households in CalFresh don't actually need to worry about the resource limit. It won't apply to them. There are some exceptions. So households who do have at least one elderly or disabled member and have a gross income of over 200% of the federal poverty level are going to need to take a look at these resource limits and make sure that they meet them. Right now, the limit is $4,250. And much like income, there are exemptions or exclusions. So, some things that you might think would count as a resource won't actually count against you. You can check either that LISNIC CalFresh guide I mentioned earlier or the Manual of Policies and Procedures. If you want to know more. Okay, so we've gone through all of this process. We've got our household. We know that they're financially eligible. So what can they actually get from the program? So here we have the maximum monthly allotment based on household size again. So as you can see, it does increase with each person added to the household, although it's not quite the same as the household of one. So, for adults in differing situations, like I mentioned earlier, multiple CalFresh households can live under the same roof as long as they're not, mandatory members who need to be in the same household. So it can be important to take a look at that just from a tactical standpoint, to help folks, get the money they need to help support them. So, they can change around some of their life circumstances, change if they're purchasing and preparing food together to potentially, qualify as their own household. Okay, so, what does the application process actually look like for CalFresh? There are quite a few, there are different ways you can actually submit your application. So in person at the local county welfare department, that's always a good option. You can also go to getcalfresh.org or through the county website. So there are the web portal to access benefits and to do a lot of online things used to be mybenefitscalwin.org. And as of last year, everybody should be on benefitscal to reflect the new system that every county in the state is on. So that can be a good place to submit applications. Also telephonically, so you can apply over the phone, but does vary a little bit from county to county. So if you're looking elsewhere, or if you move to a different county, you might want to check that just to make sure that it's still offered. After the application is filed, county staff should contact client for an interview. This is generally done over the phone, although there, which should also be in-person options if you need them. Claimants need to submit all required verifications. So, essentially the county is going to reach out and ask to do that interview, and very likely they're going to ask the applicant to provide some documents to help corroborate certain aspects of eligibility. There are, a lot of times counties will send out sort of like, here are examples of, here's the sorts of things that can prove, this aspect of eligibility, or these are the sorts of things that others have turned in. But, not everybody always has the documents that are the easiest or the most ideal for everyone else. So what you can also do is show things through what are called collateral contacts. So a collateral contact is somebody who's outside the CalFresh household, but who would be willing to, to swear or affirm that the things that are being presented to the county are true.
Okay, we had one question come in. So when using benefitscal.com, will the application be submitted to the corresponding county the applicant lives in?
My understanding is that it should. I think that there can always be trouble with computer systems, but yeah. So ideally, Benefits Cal should allow folks to submit documents to their county, and to also receive documents from their county. So yes, ideally that should be how it works. If it isn't, that might be something to raise to like the IT folks or to submit like a trouble ticket for. But that should let you submit your application or other documents to your county specifically. Here, just have a list of some things that are commonly asked for verifications. I won't read them at you, but just something to be aware of. Okay, so we've gone through all of this. We've got the application in. What's the timeline look like? So regular applications should be processed within 30 days. You can also request what's called expedited service. So these need to be processed within 3 calendar days. You have to qualify for an expedited service application though, and it can be kind of narrow, the circumstances. So if you have less than $150 in gross monthly income and less than $100 in liquid resources, if you happen to be a destitute migrant worker with less than $100 in resources, or if you live in a household where gross income and resources are less than the monthly either rent payment or mortgage and utilities payment. But regardless, whether you're on that 30-day timeline or that 3-day timeline, benefits are approved back to the date of application. Just a couple of special topics to note for folks who are unhoused and are trying to apply. You don't need to have an address in the county that you're living in, but you do need to make sure that you apply for CalFresh in the county in which you're staying in. So that can be important to check sometimes. Also, if you are unhoused, CalFresh can be used at soup kitchens and farmers markets. So it provides a little bit more flexibility. There's also the restaurant meals program. If you remember earlier on, we talked about how most people can't use their CalFresh for hot food or food purchased or prepared in store. But the restaurant meals program is an exception to this. If you're unhoused, elderly, or disabled, then you can qualify. And it can be. Once again, this can vary a little bit from county to county, so it can be important just to double check to make sure that it's also an option in depending on what county you're in. And it's also just something to note is that the restaurant meals program should be available at all Cal State universities, regardless of whether the larger county participates. And also, just something to be aware of for unhoused applicants is that identity can be verified through collateral sources. So, if you don't have some of the documents that might go along, like driver's license, birth certificate, what have you, then you can also once again have somebody who's not in the household come in and help vouch for the information you're providing.
Okay, we had one more question. So if no requirement for address, is the applicant required to provide proof of rent and utility expenses?
if they don't have them, then they shouldn't be required to provide anything. I think that, a lot of those speak to like things like deductions. So, they might be asked for them still, but, if you don't have them, they can't require you to provide something you don't have. So just to say that, they should be fine on that front. That shouldn't be a barrier to the application. Yeah, so we've gone through all of this. We know what the household is. We know what they get. We've got the application in, and they got it. So how do they keep CalFresh? It's important to note that CalFresh households are certified, which means that benefits are approved for a specific amount of time. But you are going to need to reapply for benefits to continue. Most CalFresh households are certified for 12 months and have a semi-annual report, the SAR-7, due after 6 months. So it's also important to note that while you've got the 6 and the 12-month check-in period for most households, there are certain things that you're going to need to report even if the county doesn't ask for them, and that is the household's responsibility to make these reports. Ooh, excuse me, I had some hiccups. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, so no worries there. We'll go through more about what that looks like and some of the common mandatory reporting responsibilities. And also, there are some households with elderly or disabled members who can be certified for longer periods of time than 12 months. So they might be certified for 24 or 36 months, so for 2 or 3 years, and only have annual reports due rather than 6-month reports. And in general, after these reports are made, benefits are sort of locked where they are and can only be changed in certain circumstances. So, let's talk a little bit more about those mandatory reports. Some things just need to be reported if changes occur. So if your income goes over your income reporting threshold, which you should have as a number you can reference, that should have been provided to you as part of this process. But also, even if you don't have that anymore, even if you lose it, you can ask for it again from the county, or generally it's 130% of the federal poverty level for the relevant household size. So if your income goes over that amount, you need to report that to the county. Also, ABODs, which is able-bodied adults without dependents. If your work drops below 20 hours per week or 80 hours per month, then that was something you would need to report. Although, to my knowledge, we still have a statewide waiver in place for CalFresh ABOD rules. So, that's not an issue right now, but if that waiver ever goes away in the future, that's something to keep in mind. And something important to note is that CalWORKs and most GA programs have additional or sometimes differing mandatory reports and also the obligations that go along with them. So, while it's definitely good to make sure you get your CalFresh reports in, it's also important for folks who are on more than one program to make sure that they're up to date on their reporting responsibilities for all of the programs that they're on. Just because they can differ a little, and even if they are the same, you might have to report them to more than one person or entity. Okay, so that's the mandatory reports. There's also voluntary reports. Pretty easy to remember. If it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. And what this means is, if there is a change in your household that's not a mandatory report, you can still tell the county about it. And it's highly recommended if that might increase your benefits. So some examples of that, let's say there's a change in household income, like somebody who is in the household loses a job. If your income goes down, that might cause a corresponding increase in your benefits, so that can be a good thing to report. If someone moves into or out of the house, if one of your deductions goes up higher, especially if you have medical expenses, those can really compound quickly sometimes. And so if you are the sort of household who can claim those expenses, it can be good to stay on top of it. If the report is a change in household composition or income that would cause a decrease, counties do need to act on that report if it is verified. So, just something to keep in mind when it's a voluntary report. ABODs, able-bodied adults without dependents, just touching briefly on some of those rules. The category encompasses folks who are 18 to 50 and have no kids and no disabilities. So the normal rule is that or I should say the unaltered rule is that they can receive CalFresh for 3 months in a 36-month period unless you're either working 20 hours per week or participating in an approved work program of some sort. There are exceptions here. But also these rules aren't in play right now. We have had a statewide waiver in place for a number of years, and the current one is at least going to extend through October 31st of this year. So, something to keep an eye out for if that ever changes, but as it stands, folks don't need to worry so much about these rules. And here, just have a couple of resources for folks if they want to learn more. So like I mentioned, the Listen at CalFresh guide is a great resource. It's generally extremely up to date, very searchable. Manual of Policies and Procedures from CDSS also has the official policies at the state level. And you can also look at the letters that CDSS puts out. So that's going to be things like all county letters, all county information notices, and all county welfare directors letters. You can also find those on the CDSS website, and they do also contain rules and updates about, well, more than CalFresh, it's about a lot of these programs, but it can be a good place to check if you have questions about things or you want to learn a little bit more. I think I'll give us a couple minutes if folks have any questions right now before we hop into CalWorks.
You could unmute yourself if you have a question. You don't have to type it in chat box right now.
Oh my gosh, yes, thank you. I should have said that out loud. I apologize. Okay.
No questions. Yep.
Yeah. No worries. Well, if we have the time, I'll also pause at the end if anybody has, anything that came to them later. So no worries about that. All right. Well, in that case, let's look at CalWorks. So CalWorks is the California Work Opportunities and Responsibility to Kids program. There it is. So in practice, at the federal level, the enabling legislation is called TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. So this is a block grant, which means that the federal government gives money to states, and then the states have a very large degree of control over what these programs look like in practice. So, just to say that CalWorks works a certain way, definitely might not work the same outside of California. So CalWorks is also a cash aid program for children who are deprived of parental support and can also support their adult caretaker relatives. So that word deprived is, it's a term of art here. And what that means is that at least one parent is either absent, deceased, disabled, or unemployed. That having a qualifying child with that deprivation of parental support is required to get CalWorks. So, you need both of those components. And CalWorks, unlike CalFresh, is a cash aid program. So like I mentioned earlier, CalFresh spends like cash in a lot of circumstances, but has restrictions on its use. CalWorks, once the money is in your pocket, you can do what you want with it. So, CalFresh has the household and CalWorks has the assistance unit. And so, yeah, the assistance unit is the group of folks who are going to be getting CalWorks assistance. So there are some mandatory members. Like I mentioned, you need the eligible child, which is in general either a minor, someone under 18. But if the qualifying child does turn 18 and will graduate high school before turning 19, you have a little bit of wiggle room there where you can get a little bit more time on the program. If there are eligible siblings or half siblings living in the home, then they also need to be included in the AU. Any adoptive or birth parents need to be included. If there's a circumstance where the parent of the qualifying child is themselves a minor, and so living with their parents, so a household where it would be grandparents of the qualifying child, parent of the qualifying child who is a minor themselves, and then the qualifying child. Then the grandparent also needs to be included in that situation, in that AU. And also, if there is a sponsored non-citizen who is getting CalWorks, then their sponsor also needs to be included in the AU. There are also optional members, folks who can be included if they qualify but don't need to be. So step parents fall into this. If there are other eligible children in the home, say grandchildren, nieces, nephews, not that sibling or half sibling relationship, then they can also be included. And sometimes if there is a non-parent relative caretaker, in the case that the parents aren't in the household, they can also be included in the AU. Pregnant folks should be eligible in their second trimester to apply for this program. And unlike CalFresh, where SSI recipients are eligible, they are not eligible for CalWorks. So there are certain groups of immigrants who are going to qualify for this program. Lawful permanent residents, or green card holders as they're commonly called, refugees and asylees, VAWA applicants with a prima facie case, T visa holders or applicants with a prima facie case, and U visa applicants can all apply for this program and should be able to qualify for it as long as they meet the other eligibility requirements. And one of the biggest other eligibility requirements is financial eligibility. So kind of like CalFresh, there are two different steps to the two different benchmarks you're going to need to meet in order to qualify. So you're going to need to pass the income limits for gross income and countable income. So certain things are excluded here from the definition of income. Things like SSI, loans, child's income, tax refund, income of a non-needy relative caretaker. Some examples are here. In order to be countable, income needs to be reasonably anticipated. So what that means is, much like for CalFresh, the amount and date of payment need to be known with a reasonable degree of certainty. And also an important exclusion for some folks is that if there is an abuser and you need that person's permission to access income or resources, the program should not count that as something that is available to you. So that can be a very important rule for some households. Sorry, for some AUs, households in the colloquial sense. It was a poor choice of words. There are different tests here depending on what part of the state that you live in. It's called Region 1 and Region 2. So Region 1 counties are pretty much all of the Bay Area counties. It's the areas of the state where the cost of living is a little bit higher. Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, San Francisco, laid out here. And then if you're not in Region 1, you're in Region 2. So here we have got the what's called the Minimum Basic Standards of Adequate Care, the MBSAC, kind of an ugly acronym, but we work with what we have. So applicants need to essentially fall under this line. So what you're going to do is take the gross income, which is all of the reasonably anticipated income that's not accepted. And then you're going to subtract $450 for each working person. And then you're going to take that number and compare it to this MBSAC amount. So you see here on the right side of the screen, we have a table that has the different amounts that you're going to need to fall under based on the AU size in Region 1, which, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty much every Bay Area county.
We do have one question. So
yeah, go ahead.
What is the max income a single mother of 3 can make in order to qualify for CalFresh and CalWorks?
Sorry, let me go to the last slide. Okay, so sorry, making sure. So that was single mother of 3. Okay, well, we can take a look at this table right here. So, you can look at the MBSAC. So that means that after the relevant deductions, so in this case, if we assume that this person is working, then it would be about, oh gosh, sorry, my mental math isn't what it used to be. About $2,200, it looks like. But just to say that, it's important to double check this when you do have a specific case and not just kind of like talking in generalities. Make sure that you have a good handle on how that income is actually calculated. So, make sure that the income is actually reasonably anticipated. There are lots of circumstances where, somebody might not know when they're getting paid or how much it will actually be for. And so in that case, that money shouldn't necessarily count as reasonably anticipated income. So just to say that, for a household of 3 with 1 working parent, that it's true that limit might be at about $2,200. But it's important to make sure that you're calculating it right in specific circumstances, and also that you're, aware of whether or not one of the adults in the household is, or what actually people, just anyway, making sure that you have the right amount of reasonably anticipated income and that you're making sure to take that $450 deduction for each working person. Okay. Sorry, let me just make sure that I didn't. Okay, I did not skip one. Excellent. Okay, so we've got the countable income. And now we passed through the MIPS Act, so now we're going to need to look at the net income limit. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So, so for unearned income, we're going to include all of that. For unearned disability income, you can have up to a $600 disregard. So what that means is you'll take the amount of unearned disability income specifically and subtract up to $600 off of that. If you don't have any, or if you have less than $600 worth, you take the remainder of that $600 disregard, and then you subtract it from the earned income amount and divide that amount by 2. So that's a lot of steps, but in practice, what this means is you're going to count all of the unearned income. For the unearned disability income, you can take off some of that to lower the amount that's being practically counted. And for earned income, you get a much more substantial discount rate, more or less, where you'll be able to take that number down quite a bit when you're doing this net income calculation.
Okay, we have one question. So
Okay.
are CA 2.1s still completed on absent parent when the parent who the children reside with applies for CalWORKs?
I'm so sorry. I'm not familiar with the CA 2.1 off the top of my head. Can you explain what that is real quick? Oh, a child support referral. Yeah, so child support referrals are, yeah, so that is still a requirement. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But just to say that when it comes to that sort of thing, there are some exceptions, but yeah, there are exemptions, and there are exceptions where folks can say like, hey, don't do this for me. But unless you meet one of those things, then going through that child support thing and bringing the county in on that is still a part of the process generally. Yes, somebody pointed out that DV is a very common exception, and that's exactly right. If there is DV, you can waive that and just say, I don't want to do that. Please don't pursue this, and you can get and you can be exempted from that. Okay, so here are the maximum aid payments. So, once again, we got a table here on the left side, switching it up. We got AU's size for Region 1, which is, where all the Bay Area counties are. And then you've got the maximum aid payment based on AU size for exempt and non-exempt AUs. And here, the definition of exempt is all adults in the assistance unit are receiving disability-based income, and non-exempt is everyone else. And so how we calculate the actual amount of money that somebody is going to get is we take the maximum aid payment, we subtract out that countable net income, and then what we are left with is the monthly grant amount. So that's one of the many reasons why it's important to make sure that more complicated math getting to that net income amount is done right, and that the right deductions and divisions are being applied. So there is a resource limit for CalWORKs. Currently, it's $11,634, or a little bit higher if you have an AU member who's 60 or older at $17,452. So here we have just a couple of examples, things that are countable as resources versus excluded. So cash on hand or in bank accounts, that's going to count. Stocks and bonds, some non-recurring lump sum payments, it does depend. You're going to have to check a little bit on that. And for excluded resources, a home the family lives in, that's not going to count against you. Tools of the trade, if you happen to have those, also won't count against you. And a car with an equity value of less than $25,000, or it's used in transport for someone in the home who's disabled, or it was given as a gift or donation. So then those won't count against you as well. So we've gone through all of this. We, we did we checked their financial eligibility. We have an idea of what the grant amount should be. So, now we're going to take a look at keeping CalWorks. And the first big thing that you need to be aware of is that there is a 60-month time limit for adults, which just means, and this is a lifetime clock. So adults can only receive it for 60 months. So if you were a qualifying child and later you're on CalWorks, those months as a child shouldn't count against you. But when that 60 months as an adult is up, the aid to the adult will be cut, but the qualifying child can still receive aid. So in practice, what this means is that, let's say it's a single parent household, and it's their 60th month on the program. So then, if you have one adult and 3 kids, then what that's going to mean is that the AU is going to go from size of 4 to a size of 3. So the adult's income and things like that are still going to be used for the purposes of calculation. But it just means that essentially the grant will take them out of the equation and the money will be, given to them on behalf of their minor children. The clock used to be 48 months. This changed back in 2022. Sometimes folks don't know about this change, so I'm just pointing it out because it is relatively new still. In practice, what this means is that adults need to make strategic choices about when they choose to receive aid in order to, make sure they're getting the most bang for their buck over the course of their lifetime. There are also things called extenders and clock stoppers that can sort of, add a little bit of nuance here. So extenders would be exceptions that will let you receive more months after that 60 months is already passed. Whereas clock stoppers so extenders look to the future that way. Clock stoppers are looking to the past. So you would look and say, okay, well, these months there was a life situation going on, or something else happened, and those months that I was on shouldn't be counted against my 60-month clock. So some examples: adults who are 60 years old and over, that can just get you out of this requirement. If you were disabled, if you're dealing with the effects of domestic violence, or you're the needy caretaker of a dependent child of the court. These are some examples. You can check more. There are more out there, but just to say that those can be important things to discuss if folks are concerned about their clock or within a pretty close distance of reaching it.
So we had one question come in. So someone said, can people get a caseworker to sort through all of this?
So through the county, I know that, once you're on CalWorks, you should have, I should say, so for the application process, there should be somebody who is assigned who can help you with that. The county should be in communication with you. When it comes to a clock stopper or extender, I would say that if you're not in the program anymore, but you're looking to get back on it, if there is one assigned to, let's say you have a child-only AU, you might want to talk to them about it. Essentially just to say that if you yourself are not on CalWorks, you may not have a social worker or a county representative assigned through the program. But if you do have one through other means, or if there is one with the AU, that might be a good place to start. Also, you can, if you do have other county contacts or other folks who do help you, that can also be a good place to start. And if you're concerned about it and want to explore it more, or you're worried about, or about like proving it or about making sure you actually qualify for it, you can also try to reach out to Bay Area Legal Aid. We can't promise that we will always have capacity, but if folks are concerned about this process, we might be able to help them if it does get to a point where they're worried. Okay, so unlike CalFresh, CalWorks does have welfare to work requirements in place. So adults and children who are 16 and over and not in school are expected to participate in either work, job training, or other education or work activities. So participants can be sanctioned for failing to comply with this part of the program. And the hourly requirement is going to vary a little bit based on your household composition. Certain people are exempt from these requirements. Some examples here: pregnant folks, if you're unable to participate in these activities, folks who are disabled, or anybody over 60. But otherwise, it is something you need to be aware of and make sure that you meet these requirements because it is a CalWORKs requirement. So 60 months of participation are required unless you're exempted. So what this means in practice is the entire time that adults are eligible for aid and receiving aid, they're going to need to participate in welfare to work or have an exemption. So there is a really big upside to welfare to work programs here, which is that they are required to provide supportive services. So childcare, transportation, help with ancillary expenses. It's just that which can help. A lot of things, especially childcare, are quite expensive, and so this can help take the burden off folks, and in some cases even help open up new opportunities they might not have been able to pursue absent these supportive services. There are also some more specialized supportive services that you can get, DV services, mental health and substance abuse treatments. So just to note that the Welfare to Work program is, on the one hand, a requirement on recipients, but also can provide some real help to folks who need it. Another big part of keeping CalWORKs is going to be your SAR-7 and your redetermination. Much like CalFresh, these benefits are approved for a 12-month period, which with having them mostly frozen for 6-month intervals between, checks in. The SAR-7 is going to be due at 6 months, that's semi-annual report. So that is a short report designed just to capture changes to income, address, other basic eligibility factors. But then at the end of that 12-month period, it will come a process that's the redetermination. This is a little bit more intensive. This is much closer to submitting a new application and going through the full process again. But it's something everybody has to go through. It's also important to note that in a perfect world, this should be lined up with CalFresh and Medi-Cal renewals at that year mark. It doesn't always work out that way. So much the same way that folks need to, need to stay on top of their reporting responsibilities, folks also need to stay on top of their redeterminations. Just because, we don't always live in a perfect world. Sometimes things get misaligned, and it's just important to stay on top of all of them. So CalWORKs also has mid-period reports, pretty similar to how CalFresh works. You got mandatory, so there's also an IRT, an income reporting threshold for CalWORKs. If you have an address change, if somebody in the AU has fleeing felon status, it's a term of art. This doesn't apply to most folks, but if it does ever come up. Also, if there are any violations of probation or parole. Also, and then much like sorry, hiccups again. Much like CalFresh, the difference between mandatory and voluntary is that if it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. So some voluntary mid-period reports can be changes in income. If somebody loses a job or or has their hours reduced or something like that, that can be a good thing to report because that can change your positively impact your benefit. Someone moves into or out of the home, an increase in an allowable deduction. These are all things that folks might want to report just because it could lead to a change in their benefits that is beneficial to the household. And similarly to CalFresh, if you do report a change in composition or income that would cause a decrease, counties are going to be required to act on that report if it's verified. So what else can you get? CalWORKs does come with both a couple of other things that you should get at the same time, as well as a couple of other programs that you can get depending on if it's a good fit for your situation. So you should automatically start receiving CalFresh and Medi-Cal, so it's something to be aware of. You can also ask for what are called immediate needs or special needs payments. So an immediate needs payment would be $200 at the time of application or requesting the whole amount within 3 days. If you have a non-recurring special need, essentially it's one-time emergency assistance up to $600. So, life is unpredictable. Sometimes bad things happen and you don't see them coming. So sometimes you can draw on a little bit of extra funds from the program to help meet this. Folks should also get what's called transitional CalFresh. So when CalWORKs benefits stop because the family is over income, CalFresh benefits will continue unchanged for 5 months. You can apply for regular CalFresh during this time, and so that'll just keep it going further into the future. And it's also important to note that there is no limit to the number of times the household can qualify. So, if you're in a situation where you were on the program, then off for a while, then back on again, you should get transitional CalFresh every time, as long as the reason that you went off of it is for being over income. So just something to keep in mind. It's something to keep an eye out for, if folks do end up becoming ineligible due to their income. There are also some specific programs CalWORKs offers to help with housing and specifically to prevent folks from being unhoused. So the first is diversion. So what that is it's payment or services issued for a CalWORKs applicant to help the family meet its need to survive a short-term crisis. And so what this is going to be is more specialized payments or services that are received in lieu of ongoing monthly benefits. They also family stabilization services. So it's more intensive case management and services to families in crisis, credit repair, referrals to legal services, things like that. Um, and the bigger ones for homelessness prevention are, well, homeless assistance and the housing support program. So homeless assistance comes in two flavors, but it can be a little confusing. I think the easier way to remember it is that permanent HA is designed to help you get permanent housing, and temporary HA is designed to help you get short-term housing. So they're named after the type of housing they're supposed to help you get, not the amount of time you can expect to receive them. So permanent HA is a program where it can help cover security deposits when a family is actively unhoused and has found a new place to go. Or if you have an eviction notice in hand, it can pay up to 2 months of back rent to prevent an eviction. Temporary HA is essentially helps cover the cost of short-term housing like hotels, subleases, even paying friends or family to stay with them for a short amount of time. And that is essentially, so temporary HA is going to come into play when a family does not have permanent shelter and needs short-term housing in the interim. There's also some special rules for disaster HA. So if families do become homeless or the risk thereof as the result of a state or federally declared natural disaster, that can also offer you a different route to get some of these services. And there's also the housing support program, so this is on the one hand, it's more flexible and can offer a wider range of services than HA can. But the other thing to remember is that homeless assistance is what's called an entitlement, which is if you meet the requirements, you get it. The housing support program is not an entitlement. So what that means is that there could be many people who meet the program requirements, but not all of them are going to get the housing support program. The way that this program works is there are rules at the state level, and so funding and these rules go down to the counties, and then the counties implement them. So counties realistically don't have enough money to help everybody who needs it with this program. So that's why it can be a good idea to apply, but it's also good to know that it's not a guarantee that somebody is going to actually be able to get this. So HSP helps families who are either unhoused or at risk of being unhoused by providing rental assistance and other wraparound services. So, direct financial assistance, housing navigation, connections with local providers as desired by the family. It's designed to be a little bit longer term than HA and a little bit more flexible, with more of a goal towards helping folks address the causes of their housing instability in the medium term. So as we touched on earlier, there's also a fairly wide-ranging domestic violence waiver in this program. So what that means is that survivors can request a waiver to waive any program requirement except the deprivation requirement. So, that the qualifying child needs to be deprived of parental support in one of the ways we talked about earlier. You cannot waive the income or asset requirements for the program. And also, you can't waive HA, so you don't actually have to apply for it, but also you can't waive it. Some common uses of the DV waiver, like we talked about earlier: time on aid, welfare to work participation, paternity establishment, child support cooperation. These are all things that survivors can just say, I please do not include me in this. I do not wish to participate. So it's very important to keep in mind, especially in cases where there might be worries about ongoing worries about safety. Okay, and that brings us to the end of CalWORKs. I do apologize. I think I accidentally deleted the sources of law slide, but there is also a manual of policies and procedures section on CDSS for CalWORKs. I will go back and include that when I send this out to everybody. And also that same list of ACLs, ASINs, ACWDLs. They also touch on CalWORKs, not just CalFresh, and so those can also be good sources of information. Just going to go ahead and take a brief pause to see if anybody has questions. Feel free to shout one or two out before we move on.
So we do have one. Will you or could you go over how or where to? Oh God, things are going by. Hold on. How or where to apply specifically for CalWORKs homeless assistance?
Sure. So, so for HA, like I said, so it is an entitlement. So it's it's important to, I guess, on the one hand, be aware of it, but also, to get that application in, if it could help you, especially because some of these things can be really time sensitive. So on the one hand, if you do have a caseworker assigned to your case, you should be able to let them know. In the future, hopefully, people will be able to use Benefits Cal, the online portal, to submit that. Right now, that was supposed to be included, is my understanding, but it's not currently an active feature, so just something to keep an eye out for. You should also be able to submit an application or to, submit that to, if you go in person into a county welfare office. I think that those are probably, those two especially, talking to any caseworker who's assigned to the case, or going in person, I think are probably the safest bets for now.
Okay. And the next question is, how many months is CalWORKs for immigrant adults?
As long as they qualify, it should be the same as for non-immigrant adults. It should be that 60 months. So that's the thing. As long as your immigration status allows you to qualify, and we have that on that earlier slide. After that point, the time limit rules, I don't think, should be any different for you.
How long will they pay for a hotel room?
So for temporary homeless assistance, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. So for temporary HA, oh gosh, I believe it is up to $85 a day for up to 16 days. So you got, so on the one hand, that's the sort of the outer boundaries of it for just regular temporary HA. As part of that, you're also going to folks who are getting it are going to need to reach out to potential landlords on an average of one per day, and to check in with the county. I believe it's every 7 days to keep receiving that benefit. So on the one hand, the normal is $85 a day for 16 days. If there are other situations, like if there's a state of federally declared natural disaster and that's the result, and that led to the current housing situation, or if there's domestic violence in the picture, there are other rules or exceptions that can get you more help beyond that first 16 days, but the default is $85 a day for 16 days.
Elsie, just to clarify, that is a once in a lifetime assistance, right?
So there are my understanding is that for temporary HA, there are two different DV exceptions. One is a once in a lifetime pool. The other is it's a narrower set of circumstances it applies in, but that's just once a year, can give you just a week extra, I think. So there are two different types, is my understanding of the DV rules right now. Although disaster HA, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Are those limits that you gave the 16 days, $85? Is that a lifetime limit as well?
Sorry, a confusing answer. Yes and no. So that first set of 16 days at $85 a day, everybody can get that once per year. both permanent and temporary HA. The default is you get it once per year unless you have meet an exception. So on top of that, there is a separate pool that can it's a wider DV exception that sits on top of that, and I believe that's an additional 16 days of $85 a day, once in a lifetime. The good news is that you can use that piecemeal. So, let's say you only need an extra 4 days to make ends meet before you can move in somewhere. You can just use 4 days out of that once in a lifetime pool, and you can leave the remainder of it for the future. And then there is also a narrower once in a year DV exception. So, the larger DV exception for once in a lifetime is, if you're fleeing past or present DV for, in a broader context. The more narrow one is if you have left your most recent place because of domestic violence perpetrated by like a partner or a roommate. So, the slightly different rules apply. But yeah, so the narrower one is a once a year exception. The broader one is once in a lifetime. Was that responsive?
That was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. I see we're getting on, so I'm gonna move us forward, just so we can at least get through as much as we can before 11:30 hits. Okay, so we're going to look at GA right now. So it's state mandated, but county designed, funded, and administered. What this means practically is that it's going to vary a lot from county to county. So, experiences you've had in other counties might not be true in Contra Costa and vice versa. You can find more information on the HST website, which is listed here. GA is commonly called the program of last resort. What that essentially means is that part of being qualified for GA means that you don't qualify for any other assistance program, and you need to have almost no money. It's the income and resource amounts are quite low. If you're 65 and older, you need to apply for either SSI or CAPI, depending on which would be a better fit for you. It's also important to note that general assistance is primarily a loan. So what that means is that you're not going to be required to pay unless you do gain a more steady source of income. But if you are applying for something like SSI or CAPI, then the GA that you received while you were waiting for that application to be processed, it's going to be deducted from your retroactive payment. Just because those applications can take a while, a lot of folks receive a pretty hefty lump sum retro when they get on for the first time. Also, if somebody is sponsor of a non-citizen, they're also going to have to agree to repay that GA amount should the recipient be unable to. So who can get it? GA is designed for indigent adults who are determined, needy, and not supported by other means. You need to be a resident of the county in which you're applying for. So what that means is you need to be present and reside in Contra Costa for at least 15 consecutive days. If you don't have a permanent address, for example, because you're unhoused, there should be an intention to reside form that you can sign as part of your application statement. Age requirements, indigent legal adults, as mentioned earlier. If you are a married minor, you might qualify, or if you're a minor who does not qualify for support under any other program. That last one in particular is pretty unusual. Most minors do qualify for some other type of program, but something to keep in mind. Also, for immigration status, citizens are qualified non-citizens, so lawful permanent residents, FAWA recipients, asylees, refugees. They have a couple listed out here at the bottom. So who can't get GA? Fleeing felons, if you're placed outside the county, in a non-medical out-of-home care facility. If you're living here but have no intent to establish long-term residence, SSI recipients, people who receive GA in another county for at least 3 months in the last 12 months, or who are sanctioned from GA in another county. We'll touch a little bit more about that 3 months and 12 months in a moment, but that's a very common cap on benefits. And also another one that does come up is if you are an adult who is timed out of CalWorks, so if you're at the end of that 60-month clock, or if you're ineligible due to sanctions or penalties from CalWorks, you are not going to qualify for general assistance until your youngest child is 18. And it does not matter if that child resides with you or not. In addition, where an institution provides for an individual's basic needs, they will not be eligible. And also, folks who are undocumented are not going to be eligible. So financial eligibility, there is that component with this program. So the definition of income is a little bit broader than in some of the other programs we talked about today. That's going to be any benefit available in cash. So earnings, loans, liquid assets. You see, a couple of other examples here. And also in-kind income can also count. What that means is if there's a non-cash benefit received for an item of need for less than the fair market value, or you got the item for free. So utilities, food, shelter, clothing, these can all count. Although it's important to note that them counting as income is contingent on them being provided for a calendar month. If they're provided for less than a month or only provided in part, they shouldn't count as income. You're also going to be required to apply for all sources of income that you may be eligible for. So most commonly, this is Social Security and unemployment. There is a resource limit. That resource limit is $50. There are exclusions. So, real property occupied by one of the joint owners, a vehicle, a life insurance policy. It can be important to check those just because that $50 limit, can be a barrier for folks. Also, sometimes the stimulus payments do not count. So, applying for GA, you can go to benefitscal.com to submit an application. You can apply over the phone, and also you can apply in person at a Contra Costa EHSD department location. Here, just have them listed out in case anybody needs them. So, much like a lot of these other programs, you are gonna have to verify some of your eligibility criteria here. Things like Social Security number, identification, residence, income and resources, and your immigration status. Okay, so we've gone through all of this. We've got the application in. We feel pretty confident about the eligibility factors. So what do folks actually get on the program? So it's going to be $336 for an individual, $375 per month if you have disabilities. So general assistance can be provided by electronic benefit transfer, EBT, direct deposit, vendor payments, vouchers, or in-kind payments. So there's a little bit more variety in the method for this program. 53% of the GA payment is for housing and 47% is for food, personal needs, and transportation. So the rent portion is normally sent directly to the landlord. And there can be grant supplements available for certain costs. So that rule, the 53% being sent to the landlord, does change a little bit. For folks who are unhoused, they get what's called a housing allowance, which is that 53% housing portion for 30 days if they requested a shelter bed and no bed is available, or there is a shelter bed available, but the recipient had good cause for refusing it. So, that might be, there could be all sorts of issues that might cause that, but, it's an important exception to note, that good cause exception. So if a client does accept a shelter bed, then the grant is going to be reduced to that 47% after 30 days. And also, it's important to note that, unlike CalWORKs, which should automatically, put you in with CalFresh and Medi-Cal, general assistance does not do that. But if you qualify for general assistance, there's an extremely good chance you also qualify for CalFresh and Medi-Cal. It's not a guarantee, but it's definitely something worth considering, just because those programs can offer a lot of extra support to help supplement. There is a time limit for GA we talked about earlier. So if you're deemed employable, you're only eligible for 90 days in a 12-month period. There are two exceptions, which is temporarily unemployable or more permanently unemployable. So if you have a medical condition that prevents work for 3 to 12 months, you're level 2, temporarily unemployable. And so that can let you get GA for up to that 12-month span. And level 3 unemployable is for folks who are either 65 and older or who have a medical condition that prevents work for 12 or more months. And either of those can, get you past that 90-day deadline. So how to stay on aid. So if you don't have a verified disability that puts you at level 2 or level 3, you're going to need to be available full-time to either work or seek employment. If you have a substance abuse issue, you are going to need to participate in a treatment program. GA has quarterly assessment forms due largely to that 90-day requirement. So you're going to need to stay on top of those. It's a little bit more frequent than the semi-annual reports. And also, there is the possibility of sanctions. The sanction is a 180-day discontinuance from GA. They can be given either after the first instance of a willful failure or refusal to cooperate with program requirements, or the third instance of a negligent failure to cooperate. And there shouldn't be a sanction if there was good cause for noncompliance. There are lots of reasons that people might not be able to participate in something or to get to an appointment. But just to say that it's important to keep in mind if there were extenuating circumstances in these sorts of situations. Administrative appeals are available. So if the county takes an adverse action you disagree with or fails to act, you should file an appeal. Oh, I'm so sorry. That is incorrect. Submitted via fax. Not yet, but hopefully soon. You actually need to submit it by mail. I will update this slide before I send it out. Apologize for that again. Yeah, to 400 Ellenwood Way. Yes, you need to submit, make a request in writing. The appeal deadline is 30 days from the date of the notice, and the aid paid pending deadline is before the effective date of the action. So aid paid pending is basically just saying that, I think the county's action was incorrect, and while we're still going through the appeals process and sorting that out, I would like my aid to continue coming to me and remain unchanged. These deadlines, the 30 days and before effective date of action, they can come up on people pretty quickly. So, if somebody does come to you with a GA question or a worry, it can be important to make sure that they're aware of that and are staying on top of things. The decision for the appeal will be made by non-attorney county staff, and a written decision will be issued after you've gone through this appeal. Okay. Seeing as how we are getting very close to 11:30, I'm going to move us along to get through some Social Security benefits. But if we do have a few minutes at the end, please feel free to also send me some GA questions. So there are a couple types of benefits through Social Security that we're going to talk about today. There's retirement, which is just regular retirement. There's Social Security Disability Income, which is SSDI, and Supplemental Security Income, which is for folks who are aged or disabled. So for retirement, the amount you receive is going to vary based on age and work history. For early retirement, you need to be 62, and there are limits on annual income if you're still working. Here we just have a quick breakdown of the retirement age to receive full Social Security, which is based on when you were born. And also here, just laying out the the early retirement reductions. If you do opt for early retirement, then it is going to potentially reduce the amount that you'll receive through Social Security every month. And conversely, if you delay your retirement, you can get a little bit more. And so this also breaks down, if you go past that mandatory retirement, or not mandatory, sorry, the minimum retirement age. All right, so that was just very quickly touching on regular retirement. So taking a look at Social Security disability. SSDI is a federal insurance program, provides monthly payments to eligible workers and their family members if the worker is a covered employee who's unable to work because of a severe disability. So, who is an eligible worker? You have two requirements. So first is you need to be disabled, which means unable a severe medically certified condition that has lasted or is expected to last at least 12 months. And you also need prior work history. So you need to have reported wages and paid taxes to earn the necessary credits before becoming disabled. The credits are going to depend on how much you make, with a maximum of 4 credits earned per year. So in 2018, for example, it was $1,510 per credit. It's also important to note that this program is not needs-based, so there's no asset or limitation, or sorry, no asset or income limitations attached to it. So here you see how many credits you're going to need. It does change a little bit based on your age and how long you are expected to have participated in in the economy and been employed. But it's important to keep a look at these just because folks can make at most 4 per year. So We touched on this a little bit earlier in CalFresh, talking about the definition of disability. And Social Security does have a pretty high bar. It is their definition is an inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of a medically determinable impairment, physical or mental, or a combination thereof, which can reasonably be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months or result in death. So this is a pretty high bar, and a lot of applying for this program is seeing if you can actually meet that definition. It's a 5-step process. So the first question is, are you working and making over $1,350 a month? If you're not doing that, then they're going to look at, is your condition severe? So, does it interfere with basic work activity? If the answer to that is yes, does your impairment meet or medically equal a listed impairment? And if the answer to that is yes, you move on to, can you do the work you previously have done? And if the answer to that is no, then they finally ask, can you do any other work that exists in significant numbers in the national economy? A lot of these can be difficult to meet for folks, but especially that 5th one, it can be tough just because they do look to the national economy and not to the local economy or to more personalized situations. So what benefits can you receive? It's going to depend on your work history, number of years, and amount of earnings. If you receive SSDI for 24 months, you're also going to get Medicare benefits. If you receive SSDI, you may be eligible for CalFresh or SSI. It's going to depend on how much money you're getting. There is also important to note a 5-month waiting period from the date that the person becomes disabled prior to receiving benefits. So, it's not a bad idea to start the application process, but just know that that 5-month waiting period, is mandatory. So it might affect a retro if you have them. Certain family members can also qualify for benefits under the applicant's record. That's just going to depend a little bit more about specific circumstances. You can apply at the Social Security Administration office online at www.ssa.gov or by phone. The number is listed here. So SSA, like I mentioned earlier, is going to do a pretty extensive disability evaluation. And also you have 60 days to appeal a denial. So just something important to be aware of. What you should prepare here, just a list of things that can just help smooth the process along. Just to make sure you have it all ready, especially for a lot of medical documentation, just because looking at the disability is such a big part of this process. Some other considerations: disability is reviewed periodically, and your benefit may be cut if you're no longer determined to be disabled. When they check in, it's going to depend a little bit on what your circumstances and what your diagnosis is. But here we have a couple of different guidelines for that. And also, if you do go back to work and you earn more than $1,350 per month, then there's a decent chance that they're going to cut your benefits. There are some special work rules. It's important to ask a specialist about that, or you can ask Social Security or somebody else who specializes in these programs. Okay, and I know we're going quick, so we're going to speed through SSI and then hopefully have a couple of minutes for questions. So SSI is a federal cash benefit program for low-income persons age 65 and older, or blind and disabled persons of any age, including infants and children. So 3 main requirements here: you either need to be aged or disabled, so that means over 65, or you meet the SSA definition of disability, which, like we talked about, can be a pretty high bar. You need to be low income. So they do check that for this program. So your countable income must be less than the current benefit rate, and the resource limit is $2,000 for individuals or $3,000 for a couple. And also this program can go to either U.S. citizens or to qualified immigrants. So resources, that $2,000 or $3,000 limit. There are some exceptions there. Similar to some other types of exceptions: the home you live in, car for transportation, household goods and personal effects. Also some ones that are a little more unusual: burial space, insurance policies with a combined face value of less than $1,500, and retroactive SSI benefits 9 months after you receive them. Then basically, if it doesn't fall on that list, basically everything else is going to count towards your resource limit. So the amount of cash assistance for SSI is at a set rate. Some of the current basic benefits for California are listed out here. Rates can also vary a little bit according to your living situation or other income. Anyone who is receiving SSI should automatically get Medi-Cal, so that's something also to keep an eye out for. And people who are receiving SSI are, as mentioned earlier, eligible for CalFresh as of June 1st, 2019. We've gotten a little bit past that date, but still included here in case folks are a little, unsure about that. So here we just have a quick table that is giving you differences between SSDI and SSI. So SSDI is at its core an insurance program for workers and their families, regardless of income or assets. The benefits are based on work history. They're issued on the 3rd of the month. You don't need to worry about resource limitations. And they do have some strict time frames in which disability must be established after work ceases. By contrast, SSI is what's called a welfare program for low-income individuals with low assets. There's no work history or earnings requirement, but they also have very strict resource limitations. There is actually a little bit of difference there also, that the SSDI does have those strict timeframes in which to establish disability, whereas SSI does not require those same timelines. So pretty similarly, if you're looking to apply, you should go to Social Security Administration office. You can make an appointment. It's generally a good idea to apply as early as possible because benefits are retroactively paid to the date of application. And much like SSDI, you're going to have 60 days to file an appeal. Some things to prepare. A lot of names and addresses of doctors, hospitals, caseworkers, or clinics, names and dosages of medications, medical records, lab test results. That's the thing, is Social Security does have a very high bar for their definition of disability. And so it can often be a good idea to get your ducks in a row, knowing you're going to be going into that process. You can appeal if you disagree with how Social Security's decision came down. To take an adverse action, you have 60 days to appeal the notice. If you want your benefits to continue unchanged, you need to appeal within 10 days, which can be a pretty quick turnaround. And it's also important to note that SSA gives 5 days from the date of the notice for mailing. If a client comes to you to close close to their appeal deadline, you can help them submit an appeal online. We have a link provided here. You can also Google SSA appeals. And you can also download and complete a request for reconsideration from ssa.gov and send it to the office on behalf of somebody else. So, just because these processes can take a long time, if they're getting close to that 60 days, it can be a big benefit to get that in quickly. Okay. Whew, sorry, I know we really breezed through those last couple of sections, but we do have 1 or 2 minutes. So if folks do have questions, feel free to shout them out. I am happy to stay on a couple extra minutes to answer if need be.
We had one question back during the GA section. So does
Perfect.
GA advocate for GA clients who apply to SSI or apply for SSI or SSDI?
To my knowledge, there is some assistance that's given, but it's not the same as having like a full-time advocate who might help you through that process. But I will be honest, I have not had much personal exposure to that process, so it's possible that things might be different than my understanding of them on that one.
Okay, it looks. We'll give people some time. You can ask your questions you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can put it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For SSDI, I have a client who is currently disabled, about 34 years old, was working, but because of a violent crime that this client experienced, they're no longer working at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be best for them to just try to apply for SSDI, and then if they do start working, like, does it get cut off, or It just depends on how much they're making then. 'Cause I don't know, because he doesn't know, she doesn't know when, they'll be able to go back to work or what they
Mhm.
should do like in the meantime.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I can't give advice about specific cases like that. And also, just cards on the table. My personal expertise. I handle CalWorks, CalFresh GA cases. So sort of two different reasons that unfortunately I can't answer that today. But I think that if you do have those questions, um, there. So I know right now Bay Legal doesn't have huge capacity to take Social Security cases in Contra Costa County, but there are some other community organizations you can maybe try to reach out to see if they can help with that. And also, there's always the Contra Costa County Bar Association if the person you're working with is looking for a private attorney.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't be of more help there.
Okay, so it looks like that's all of the questions. So I would like to thank Elsie for her presentation, and we will be sending out an email afterwards that includes the slides, includes a recording, and it also includes an evaluation, which I hope everyone can click on and take a minute to fill it out because it helps us improve our future workshops. Right. So thank you, everybody, and
Good weekend. Thank you, Elsie.
have a good weekend.
Of course, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time.
Elsie, if you could send the slides to me or Nick, that would be great.
Yeah, will do. I just need to make a